So, how did we get here? How did we get to the point where we are seeing once again a blow up in the Middle East? Only this time it's between Israel and Iran. Now, we'll start things off pre 1979, and it was a very different relationship back then. From 1948 to 1979, Iran and Israel had pragmatic ties under the Shah. Before 1979, Iran, under Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, maintained a relationship that was somewhat mutually beneficial. At the time, both nations were aligned with the US during the Cold War, shared concerns about Arab nationalism, specifically looking at Nasser's Egypt, and cooperated in areas like intelligence and oil trade. Iran, who at the time was a non-Arab state, did not join Arab wars against Israel and actually recognized it as its own country. This period showed that Israel and Iran tensions are not inherent but tied to the ideological shifts that came about later, and honestly set the stage for the post-1979 angst between the two countries. But 1979 changed everything. That's when the Islamic Revolution in Iran took place, and Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini overthrew the Shah and established an Islamic Republic hostile to Israel. Khomeini branded Israel as Little Satan, with the US as the Great Satan, framing it as an imperialist outpost oppressing Palestinians. Iran cut diplomatic ties, turned the Israeli embassy in Tehran into a Palestinian one, and began supporting anti-Israel groups like Hezbollah, who was founded in 1982. This revolution introduced an ideological conflict rooted in Iran's theocratic anti-Zionism, rejecting Israel's existence and setting a foundation for decades of antagonism. This is when the true start of modern tensions began, was in 1979. Everything before that, Iran recognized and got along with Israel. So you can see Iran's stance was not foundational. It changed with the changing tides of the uprising in Islamic extremism within Iran. Now, 1980s to 1990s, proxy conflicts and regional rivalries began. In 1982, Israel invaded Lebanon, and this led to the rise of Hezbollah. As I said, it was founded in 1982. Now, Israel invaded Lebanon to counter Palestinian militias led by the emergence of Hezbollah, as well as some other Iranian-backed Shia militia groups. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps trained and funded Hezbollah, which began targeting Israeli forces and civilians, notably in the 1983 Beirut barracks bombing, although primarily it was aimed at US and French forces. Hezbollah became Iran's primary proxy against Israel, establishing a pattern of indirect warfare that persists to this day. This deepened Israel's perception of Iran as a growing threat. When the 1990s came, Iran's nuclear ambitions emerged. Now, Iran initially started this program under the Shah with US support, and it was revived in the 1980s and gained momentum in the 1990s. Israel, who is aware of Iran's anti-Israel rhetoric and support for groups like Hamas, began viewing the program as an existential threat, especially as Iran developed ballistic missiles capable of reaching Israel. Now, the nuclear issue became a central flashpoint, with Israel fearing that a nuclear-armed Iran could embolden its proxies or directly threaten Israeli security, and this set the stage for conflicts that most of us really started hearing about in the last 20 years or so. So it was when we crossed into the new millennium that we saw Iran's nuclear programs escalate. This is when the Natanz facility was exposed, and this is because an Iranian opposition group revealed Iran's secret uranium enrichment facility at Natanz, confirming Western suspicions of a clandestine nuclear program. Israel, already alarmed by Iran's support for Hezbollah and Hamas, began advocating for international action and preparing covert operations. The exposure of the nuclear program crystallized Israel's focus on Iran as a primary strategic threat, shifting tensions from proxy conflicts to a direct confrontation over Iran's nuclear capabilities. This led to more covert operations in the early 2000s. Iran's nuclear program advanced under Iran and President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, who ramped up uranium enrichment after a brief suspension during negotiations with the EU3, UK, France, and Germany. Now, the Natanz enrichment facility, revealed in 2002 by Iranian opposition groups, became the focal point of international concern. Israel views Iran's nuclear program, as I said, as an existential threat, and this facility made Israel more hyper-aware of that threat. And on top of that, Tehran's anti-Israeli rhetoric and support for groups like Hezbollah and Hamas didn't help the situation either. This is when Western powers began imposing sanctions, and Israel began advocating for military action to prevent Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons. The US, under President George W. Bush, labeled Iran as a part of the axis of evil, aligning with Israel's concerns, but prioritizing diplomacy and sanctions over strikes. Then in 2006, the Lebanon war started, and Hezbollah played a major role. goal. Israel fought a 34-day war against Hezbollah, which, as I said, is an Iranian-backed Shia militia group in Lebanon. Iran provided Hezbollah with rockets, training, and financial support, enabling attacks on Israeli civilians. So Israel conducted airstrikes that targeted Hezbollah strongholds. However, they were resilient and maintained a presence in Lebanon and even expanded into the broader Middle East, therefore bolstering Iran's regional influence. This Lebanon war solidified Iran's proxy strategy, using Hezbollah to deter Israeli aggression. Israel's failure to decisively defeat Hezbollah fuels its determination to counter Iran's growing regional power, including its nuclear ambitions. In 2010, Israel conducted the Stuxnet cyber attack, as well as some assassinations. Now, the Stuxnet virus, although they deny it, was created by Israel and the US, and it infected Iran's nuclear facilities, destroying about 1,000 centrifuges at Natanz. Concurrently, Israel is blamed for assassinating Iranian nuclear scientists, including Masoud Ali Mohammadi. These covert operations delay Iran's nuclear progress but provoke retaliation. Iran accelerates its enrichment programs and invests in cyber defense, while its leadership becomes more defiant against the US and Israel, viewing such attacks as proof of Western and Israeli hostility. In 2011 and 2012, Israel intensified its covert actions and allegedly conducts further assassinations of various nuclear scientists and Iranian officials, while conducting additional cyber attacks such as the STARS virus. Iran responds with ballistic missile tests and increased support for its proxies. In 2012, Israeli drones reportedly strike Iranian drone facilities. Both sides continue to carry out hybrid warfare, trying to avoid direct confrontation with Iran's nuclear progress despite setbacks, alarming Israel, who lobbies for harsher sanctions and keeps military options on the table. Now, from 2013 to 2015, under President Hassan Rouhani, Iran engages in talks with the P5+1, which is the US, UK, France, China, Russia, and Germany. The 2015 Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or JCPOA, is signed by all countries involved, requiring Iran to reduce its centrifuges to 6,104, limit uranium enrichment to 3.67%, and allow robust International Atomic Energy Agency inspections. In return, Iran received sanctions relief. Now, the deal extended Iran's nuclear breakout time, the time needed to produce enough fissile material for a bomb, from about 2 to 3 months to about a year, easing fears of an imminent nuclear Iran. However, Israel, led by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, opposed the deal, arguing it legitimizes Iran's nuclear infrastructure and fails to address its missile program or regional aggression. The JCPOA creates a rift between Israel and the Obama administration, with Netanyahu warning that diplomacy will not stop Iran's nuclear ambitions. So now we move into 2016, the Trump administration, where the US withdrew from the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action and apply maximum pressure. President Trump called the JCPOA a bad deal and reimposes crippling sanctions on Iran. Israel strongly supported this move, viewing it as a chance to pressure Iran economically and militarily. But in response, Iran begins to violate the JCPOA limits, enriching uranium beyond the agreed upon levels. The US withdrawal undermines the deal, heightening tensions, and Iran's economy suffers, but its leadership doubles down on nuclear advancements and proxy activities, blaming the US and Israel. Israel intensified airstrikes against Iranian targets in Syria and weapons transfer sites where they transfer weapons to Hezbollah. In 2020, a key figure in Iran's nuclear program, Mohsen Fakhrizadeh, is assassinated by Israel. This follows the US killing of Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps Commander Qasem Soleimani, which prompts Iran to completely abandon all JCPOA limits. These high-profile killings weaken Iran's nuclear and military leadership, but incites vows of revenge within the Iranian people. Iran's nuclear program accelerates, with reports of uranium enriched to 20% purity, which is closer to the 90% weapons-grade levels. This tit-for-tat escalation fuels a cycle of retaliation, with Iran attacking Israeli-linked ships and Israel sinking Iranian assets. Things go somewhat quiet until 2021, when President Joe Biden attempts to revive the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, so long as Iran returns to compliance. Indirect talks in Vienna falter as Iran demands sanctions relief first, while Israel opposes any deal citing Iran's advanced nuclear capabilities. The failure to revive the JCPOA allows Iran to stockpile enriched uranium, reportedly enough for 8 to 10 nuclear weapons by 2023, though weaponization remains uncertain. Israel's skepticism of diplomacy grows, and it signals readiness for unilateral action. In 2023, the IAEA reports that Iran has enriched uranium to 60% purity near weapons grade, sparking global alarm. Meanwhile, Israel's campaigns against Iran's proxies, Hamas and Hezbollah, intensify after Hamas's October 7th, 2023 attack on Israel, which kills 1,200 and triggers the Gaza war. Iran-backed Hezbollah and Yemen Yemen's Houthis escalate attacks on Israel, but Israel decimates both groups' leadership by 2024. Iran's nuclear progress here, combined with its weakened proxies, creates a strategic dilemma for them. Iran's deterrence relies on Hezbollah and Hamas, but their losses embolden Israel to act against Iran directly. Netanyahu argues Iran's vulnerabilities offer a limited window for strikes. Israel conducted airstrikes on Iranian targets in Syria, killing Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps generals in 2024, and it's accused of assassinating Hamas leaders, including Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran. Iran retaliates with missile and drone attacks against Israel in April and October of 2024, causing minimal damage but escalating tensions. Israel strikes back on October 26, 2024, which damages Iranian air defenses and signals a preparation for larger operations that we're seeing now. So basically, the shadow war turned overt. Both sides now are firing missiles at each other. Iran's missile attacks demonstrate its arsenal, but expose its limited ability to penetrate Israeli defenses. Israel's strikes reveal its intent to degrade Iran's military and nuclear capabilities, setting the stage for a major operation, but they honestly can't fully subdue Iran without U.S. support. And even then, there's a question of whether it can be done. And therefore, we see on June 13th, 2025, Israel launching a massive aerial campaign targeting Iran's nuclear facilities, Natanz, Fordo, etc., their missile sites, their military leadership, as well as some of their nuclear scientists. The strikes involve over 200 fighter jets and aim to roll back Iran's nuclear threat. Iran responds with 380 plus missile strikes, and both sides sustain casualties. Obviously, these strikes risk blowing up a war in the region and disrupts U.S.-Iran nuclear talks that were scheduled to take place in Oman. All of this frustrating Donald Trump's diplomatic efforts to get a deal done. Iran has taken action to potentially disrupt the flow of oil through the Strait of Hormuz, which could spike oil prices to $120 to $130 per barrel, which would be close to doubling what we've experienced over the last few years. While Donald Trump has overtly stated he supports Israel in their efforts, it has privately strained relations between the two countries. Israel's unilateral action reflects its distrust of diplomacy and belief that Iran's nuclear program had reached a point of no return. However, the strike's long-term success is uncertain, as Iran's fortified nuclear sites may require sustained attacks, potentially needing U.S. support. So that is where we're at now, and that is where we came from. I hope this was informative to everyone so that you could better understand why there is now a war between Israel and Iran, and understand that this wasn't how it always was. There were decades where those two countries actually got along.